values that brings us together. A school is a great example of a family. All of us in this gym today can consider each other part of the New Lisbon family. And for this simple reason of where we live, where we work, where we go to school. But similarly, when you choose to serve your country and join the military, you also become part of a family. Everyone in this family has sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We've also committed to upholding certain core values that will distinguish us for the rest of our lives. Additionally, as veterans, this common bond means that all of us have been willing to sacrifice personal desires to support something much bigger than ourselves. Korean War veteran and Purple Heart recipient Howard William Osterkamp was quoted by saying, "All gave some, and some gave all." I feel that this statement is a perfect explanation of the importance to thank the veterans that have served and those that continue to serve this country. What I'm going to read to you is a historical perspective that will describe the significance of Veterans Day and how Wisconsin, in particular Wisconsin National Guardsmen, have had an impact from that day's inception going forward. 103 years ago, the fighting stopped in what was at the time the deadliest war the world had ever known. Millions upon millions of people died on both on and off the battlefield. The First World War changed the world, and it was so horrific that it was believed to be the war to end all wars. That's why the ceasefire began. At 11 a.m. local time on November 11th, 1918. It was originally commemorated. Thousands of soldiers from Wisconsin's 32nd Division fought on the battlefields of France and Germany until the final months leading up to the Armistice Day. In the months before, the 32nd earned its now famous symbol, the red arrow. They were able to break through every enemy line that they encountered. The reputation the unit earned in combat during World War I was one so fierce that they earned the nickname from the French, which essentially meant the Terribles. And before the war's end, the 32nd had fought in 4 major campaigns, sustained thousands of casualties in the so-called War to End All Wars. But of course, World War I did not end all wars. In fact, it sowed the seeds for the Second World War, and the Red Arrow once again played a starring role as it fought in brutal campaigns across the Pacific theater, ranging from New Guinea to the Philippines and ultimately to Japan. Before the war's end, the 32nd had logged 654 days in combat, and more than any other division in war. Along the way, these Wisconsin National Guardsmen suffered thousands of casualties. They battled disease and unbearable conditions, fighting against tough and determined enemies. And perhaps because the original Armistice Day did not end in a lasting peace, our focus then shifted from a historic armistice which ended World War I to the men and women who put on the uniform of our nation's military forces. As much as we long for peace and guard our nation to ensure it, we must always be prepared to bring our nation's might to bear against those who threaten our liberties and those of our allies. 60 years ago, the Wisconsin National Guard's 32nd Division was called to duty for the Berlin crisis, when the Soviet Union signed a treaty with East Germany and West Berlin was at risk of being cut off from the world. Though the Red Arrow Division was not sent overseas, while it trained at Fort Lewis and Fort Irwin, it demonstrated the same prowess that earned it accolades in both World Wars. The 32nd was made a part of the Strategic Army Corps, meaning the division was ready for a joint Army and air deployment to just about anywhere on Earth. In this case, the soldiers of the 32nd did not go to war, but they were part of a massive call-up during the Cold War, and they played a role in keeping West Berlin from becoming part of the Soviet bloc. Their mobilization sent a clear message to the Soviet Union at the time that the United States could mobilize its forces quickly and act as a deterrent against the Soviet aggression in Berlin or anywhere else in the world. And though they did not face the dangers of combat, our Red Arrow troops still left families and jobs for the better part of a year. Some soldiers made much less on active duty than they did on their civilian jobs, but their sense of duty prevailed, and they served our nation admirably when and where they were called. The Wisconsin Guard continued that legacy in the subsequent generations 30 years ago. Again, several National Guard units were serving in Saudi Arabia as part of a massive multinational coalition to liberate Kuwait from Iraq. In World War I and II, most, if not all, National Guard units were called up to go to war. That changed after World War II, and especially during the Vietnam War. The National Guard was unfortunately rarely sent overseas. After Vietnam, Pentagon developed a total force policy that included the Guard as part of its efforts. Military leaders learned their lesson in Vietnam, where it deployed largely without the Guard. They learned that when Guard units deploy, it brings Main Street USA with it and the support of the communities across the nation. As citizens, soldiers, and airmen, the National Guard, both Army and Air, are made up of business owners, farmers, teachers, nurses, plumbers, welders, and moms and dads, who mobilize when their nation calls them to serve. Desert Storm was the first major opportunity to see whether National Guard members had what it took to serve alongside active duty troops. It was the first chance to see if the total force concept would really work. And it did. National Guard soldiers served shoulder to shoulder with their active duty counterparts and accomplished the mission. The reason isn't hard to understand. Whether active duty or reserve component, each service member joins an organization larger than themselves. They take an oath to serve in peace and war, possibly at the cost of their life, but certainly, and I know this from experience, the cost of their family. Often that cost is measured in first steps, first words, birthdays, graduations, weddings, anniversaries, all missed. There's a commitment deep in the heart of our service members to do what it takes to accomplish the mission. And it's this commitment in our veterans that has led us to victory for our nation over the years. Quite simply, the sacrifices borne by our nation's veterans from all the armed forces is what paved the way for the freedoms and prosperity we enjoy today as a nation. We may have our differences in this country, but we are truly the most blessed nation in the world, thanks to the service and the sacrifice to all of those that have worn the uniform. Here in Wisconsin, more than 20,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen deployed to combat theaters around the globe. In virtually every unit in the organizations deployed. Even today, on Veterans Day, hundreds of Wisconsin Guard members are currently in harm's way around the globe. Our 135th Medical Company, based out of Waukesha, is currently providing medical care in Kuwait and Iraq, while our Sparta and our Viroqua-based 107th Maintenance Company is spread across Eastern Europe. Even the 115th Fighter Wing out of Madison is deployed with hundreds of airmen for its final F-16 deployment before they transition to the new airframe F-35s. And Milwaukee's 128th Air Refueling Wing continues to deploy airmen worldwide in support of global contingency ops. Over the past 5 decades, and certainly over the past 20 years, we've seen generations of veterans who have volunteered to wear the uniform. Every generation of Americans has had its citizens who have been willing to serve, and they represent the very best of these generations. And we're lucky that such men and women live. Military service was no longer a legal obligation for people of a certain age, but veterans will tell you they felt an obligation to serve our nation. Some did for only a short season, while others made a career of 20, 30, or 40 years or more in uniform. All are deserving of our undying respect and gratitude as citizens of this great nation. It's for this reason that we set aside a day today to acknowledge those who put on the nation's uniform and put their lives at risk for the sake of our country. Not to glorify war, but to honor those who put their country and put their fellow service members ahead of themselves. Because deep down, we recognize and appreciate the values and qualities our veterans possess. The values and the qualities built our nation nearly 225 years ago, and they keep our nation strong and free today. Thank you for honoring this day, and thank you for allowing me to share this honor with all of you. Thank you.